Hello, everyone, and namaskar. So today's discourse is titled Sadhana, Abhidhya, and Kiirtana. And this discourse was given on January 10th, 1979, Kolkata, India. Many philosophers say that the number of sensory and motor organs is not 10, but 11. 5 sensory, 5 motor, and 1 more, the mind. Whatever the organs do, they do with the sanction of the mind. When the mind wants to steal, the hands do the action. Although the hands, which are undoubtedly a motor organ, do the physical stealing, the real thief is the mind. It would not be just to put the entire blame on the motor organs. That is why reputed philosophers say, why should the mind be exempted? Why should we blame the organ, leaving aside the actual entity at fault? Thus they say, there are 11 organs. The mind has 2 main functions, thinking and recollection. What has been done in the past, say 10 years ago, remains stored in the mind. This is memory. Thinking is sowing the seeds of one's future actions. The organs function when there is an attempt to externalize an internal thought. That is, when the internal thought is projected outward. Under natural circumstances, when someone is thinking, the sensory and motor organs are inactive. But when the process of externalization begins, when the mind thinks something and projects a thought into the external world, those organs immediately jump into action. This externalization is called utkepan in Sanskrit. It is just like flicking a piece of butter into a hot frying pan, which the cook does to give a richer aroma to the food. In the same way, when the mind decides to externalize an internal thought, it flicks it, causing the sensory and motor organs to spring into action. Imagine a scoundrel is standing in front of you. The man is such a rogue that you feel like slapping him, but do not actually do it. It is only when you decide, let me slap that scoundrel, that your hands actually strike him. When the inner urge to externalize the feeling becomes strong enough, your hands leap into action. A great person is one who has complete control over the externalization of thoughts. A thought will not always be expressed physically. One may have a desire to hit someone or a desire to steal, but never actually does it due to one's self-control. A person who has such control over the mind can externalize internal ideas more vigorously than a normal person can. You may have met people who never lose their temper unnecessarily, but utilize anger with the utmost control for benevolent reasons. This is because they have control over their minds. In sadhana, particularly in Abhidhya, the spiritual aspirants withdraw the mind from its numerous preoccupations and keep it fixed on specific ideas. You should remember that the human mind is occupied with more objects than the mind of any other living creature. This year's RU discourse explains how the increase of knowledge in human beings leads to an increase in the number of psychic objects. An animal cannot think about more than 6 or 7 objects at a time, but an ordinary person can think of more than 50 objects at a time. Human beings have 50 vrittis, psychic urges, and those 50 vrittis are also complex in their functioning. As the vrittis become more complex, so do their functions. A vritti can either be kept within one's mind or it can be externalized. One can steal both mentally and in the external world. Hence, as each of these 50 vrittis can be expressed both internally and externally, there are 100 possible expressions. These 100 expressions can be expressed in 10 directions. 6 pradesha directions, north, south, east, west, above and below, and 4 anudisha directions, northeast, southeast, northwest, and southwest. So the total number of expressions comes to 100 times 10 equals 1000. That is why the pineal gland is called Sahasrara chakra, or that which expresses itself in 1000 directions. I have also said that in the future, the number of vrittis may further increase. The more complicated social life, family life, the realm of thought, and the realm of intellect become, the more vrittis will develop. For example, the vritti cunningness may be expressed in many more ways. To fulfill their desires, people will develop different types of cunningness, which may become different vrittis in future. For example, the cunningness required to procure an object by devious means, the cunningness needed to give a promise knowing full well that one will never keep it, and the cunningness required to trick someone into believing that one did not tell a lie when in fact one did tell a lie, may all become separate brittis in future. Thus, in the future, as people's thought processes become more complicated, many new brittis will develop. The number of brittis may not stay at 50. Just imagine the situation that will arise in the future as a result of humanity's ever increasing thirst for knowledge. To meet these developments, the nerve cells and nerve fibers will have to become more complex. Consequently, the human cranium will become larger, and the size of the head will increase. The hands and the feet will become weaker and weaker, and human beings may even lose the ability to walk. Today, the human toes have almost stopped functioning. In spiritual actions, we have almost no use for them. Whereas at one time, when we used to walk on four legs, we used our toes as much as our fingers. The front legs were used less and less and were transformed into arms. And thus, these days, it has become almost impossible for us to crawl on all fours. There was a time when humans would run on four legs, but today they cannot do that. After a time, children feel uncomfortable crawling around on all fours and try to walk on their hind legs. In the initial stages, when they try to stand up, they soon fall down. Again they stand up, again they fall down. When they finally develop the habit of standing on two legs, there are corresponding changes in the physical structure so that the use of their arms become less. In the future, the legs will be used less and less, and the capacity to move on them will decrease. The arms will become thin, and the head will become abnormally large. Today, we think that such people will look very strange, but in the future, one may hear people commenting, "Oh, how handsome he looks with eyes as small as little peas and arms as thin as jute sticks. He can't hear anything with his ears. In fact, he hasn't got any ears at all. What an attractive man." Although it seems slightly repulsive to us, this will become the standard of beauty in the future. People will judge beauty according to the standards of the day, saying, "Oh, those stick-like arms of his make him look so handsome. The fellow can't walk properly. How wonderful." And if someone can walk, people will say, "How indecent, that fellow looks hobbling around on two legs." But if he crawls along the ground, they will say, "How wonderful, how beautiful." If we were to see this sort of scene today, however, we would say, "How unsightly. That fellow is uglier than an owl." The notion of what is beautiful or ugly, or good or bad in human beings changes from age to age and in different environments. Those who are black complexion will say, "How beautiful black is. Why is that man so white? Has he contracted leukoderma, white leprosy? How repulsive, how utterly repulsive." That is, human judgment is relative. It changes according to time, place, and person. In one particular country of the world, people decompose small fishes, make a sauce out of them, and then bury it in the ground. After 3 months, when the sauce is so rotten that its odor can be smelled even a mile away, they dig it up and eat it with rice and pulses. "Oh, how delicious," they exclaim. But if we were to eat it, we would complain, "How obnoxious, how repulsive." In that same country, a gentleman was frying luchi, puffed unleavened bread, in cow's ghee. The village chief came up to him saying, "Can you please go and cook your food in some other place, far away from here? We have no idea what you're cooking, but whatever it is, it smells terrible. We can't stand it anymore." It means they do not like the smell of pure cow's ghee, which for us is a very nice smell. Thus, the number of brittis in the mind will gradually increase. If anyone disagrees with this, they are mistaken. Everything in this world is subject to change. Humans evolved from animals and now have many more brittis than animals. Due to the development of human intellect and the consequent increases in brittis, languages also changes. In the Sanskrit language, there are over 500,000 words. In English, over 400,000. And in Bengali, about 125,000 words. Of all the Indian languages, Bengali has the largest vocabulary, and even that has only about 125,000 words. The most developed species of monkey has a vocabulary of about 800 words. The most undeveloped human beings living in certain forests have a vocabulary of about 950 words. Thus, the undeveloped humans have only a slightly larger vocabulary than the most developed monkeys. The most developed species of monkeys is the uluka in Sanskrit, red-faced apes, which have a larger vocabulary than other species of ape. Each of their words, such as kyun, khan, kui, etc., has a different meaning, but no one has yet taken the trouble to compile a dictionary for them. To withdraw the 10 sensory and motor organs in the mind from all their objects, that is, from the grip of all the brittis, and to direct them towards Paramapurusha is called Abhidhyana. We say directed towards Paramapurusha because Paramapurusha is the source of the creation of mind. His mind has been condensed to create the unit mind. His thought waves have been converted into the mental and physical bodies, and his mental stuff has been transformed into the 5 fundamental factors. Those 5 fundamental factors, through further clash and cohesion, have been turned into subtle mind. The human mind does not come directly from Paramapurusha. It comes from crude matter, which in turn comes from the macrocosmic mind. But when the human mind is directed towards a supreme being, it should not be directed through crude matter. It should be directed straight towards the cosmic mind. In Sanchara, the extroversial phase of movement, matter originates from the cosmic mind, and unit mind evolves out of matter. In the process of returning to its original abode, however, the mind should not be allowed to move through matter, but should proceed directly towards the cosmic mind. If the mind is engrossed in crude matter, it will become crude. That would be a very dangerous thing. That is why one should avoid idol worship. In this introversial phase, all 50 brittis should be directed towards the supreme goal. The mind which was swayed away by the 50 brittis should now be redirected. How? The activities of the 10 organs should first be withdrawn and suspended in the mind, and the suspended mind should be directed towards Paramapurusha. In the process of withdrawal, or pratyahara, all the organs should be channelized towards the subtle mind. What is dhyana? To suspend all the brittis and then to direct them towards the Supreme One is dhyana. There are 2 definitions of dhyana. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the suspension of all psychic propensities, Patanjali. Sarva Chinta Parityago, Nishinto Yoga Uchate. Yoga is the attainment of a composed mind, unperturbed by the thought, Tantra. The mind should be suspended. But where should the suspended mind go? Suppose we build a dam in the mouth of a river. If there is not a small outlet for the water, the dam will burst under the force of the current, which could be catastrophic. Similarly, if the mental flow is checked, it is also dangerous. The mind must be directed along a particular path. It must have some kind of mobility. Dhyan means to direct the mind towards the Supreme One. Remembering Paramapurusha as Dhyan. In this thought process, there is a sense of mobility. The absence of mobility leads to crudeness and ultimate destruction. Those of you who are students of psychology will understand this subject better. There are 2 distinct paths. The first is to stop the extroversial tendencies of the mind and become absorbed in the inner goal. The second is to keep all the sense organs engaged in the same activity, such as Kiirtana. When Kiirtana was first invented, the psychophilosophy behind it was this. At the time of Kiirtana, the vocal cord sings, the ears hear, and the hands and feet dance, and thus all the organs are kept preoccupied with the divine. They are not allowed to move wherever they want, but are kept engaged. There is a popular Indian superstition that when ghosts are not kept busy, they break the necks of their prey. Similarly, if the sensory and motor organs are not kept engaged in the attainment of the divine, they may lead one astray. Kiirtana is therefore most beneficial as it keeps all the organs fully engaged in a spiritual pursuit. However, while doing Kirtan, if one listens to anything else, the mind will be diverted. Suppose while doing Kirtana, one lady asks another, "Well, sister, what did you cook today?" This will also be heard by the practitioners of the Kiirtana. To prevent these undesirable sounds from being heard, it is advisable to play some instrument during Kiirtana. A mrindanga, a kind of drum, or some similar instrument should be used. But one should not play any heavy sounding instrument like a dak, a large drum played with sticks, a dol, a loud drum, or a gong. The mind prefers to hear a sweet sound, like that of a mrindanga, than a harsh sound. Some time ago I mentioned that Bola Maira said that when the cawing of crows and the beating of drums stop, human ears get some relief. People do not like to hear such harsh, unpleasant sounds. The sound of the mrindanga may not be perfect, but it has one quality. It is very sweet. Thus, whenever a distracted mind hears the sweet music of a mrindanga, it returns to the proper place. A remarkable science lies in Kiirtana. Thank you.